What is it about Hollywood that still lacks diversity? That's a question. They ask another question. Is it the still perpetuating white privilege of society that elevates Caucasian opportunities but diminishes that of other ethnicities? These are really great questions, okay? I'm not gonna lie and say these are not great questions. The author of this article is asking some really uncomfortable, challenging questions. So this is important, a part of my study and my research, to examine these things. Whiteness in film. Yesterday in my live, I made mention that whiteness is anti-black. And what it meant to be anti-black was a definition created by a sister and she used 4 components. She used being pro-black means to be pro-justice, pro-freedom, pro-liberation, and pro-humanitarian. And I made the statement, in my opinion, whiteness in film is anti-black because it's against or opposition to, because the definition, looking at the definition of what anti-black is according to Merriam-Webster, and to be anti-black means to be opposition or opposed to blackness. And looking at the roots and foundations of where whiteness in film came from, and the shadows and the echoes through time of how that representation still continues. Now, in this article, the author entitled this snippet, it may be a blog post, but nonetheless, it still speaks volumes. The title for this literature is The Perpetuating Whiteness in Today's Films. And I just want to go over some questions again. One question to mention is, in the 21st century world that we are supposed to be living in the 21st century world that we are supposed to be living in, where racism and discrimination are frowned upon, why is there still a permanence, a continuity, and a focus on almost all Caucasian casts in the film industry. Now, I kind of read that slowly. Let me read it a little bit faster. In the 21st century world that we are supposed to be living in, where racism and discrimination are frowned upon, why is there still a permanence, a continuity, and a focus on almost all Caucasian casts in the film industry? Another question. What is it about Hollywood that still lacks diversity? Another question. Is it the still perpetuating white privilege of society that elevates Caucasian opportunities but diminishes that of other ethnicities? So, as I'm reading these questions, it appears to me that the author of this little snippet here is possibly suggesting what I made an opinion on yesterday, that whiteness and going over some material in film from the silent film decades to the classic Hollywood decades to the black exploitation decades to where black people began to reimagine and began to change their image. Owning the responsibility themselves in changing the image in film. Where great directors, outstanding actors, men and women, women and men, created businesses, films, movies in the lane of changing the image or the perspective or how blacks are seen. And it didn't start in the 80s. This started in the 1930s. During the Harlem Renaissance, this type of thought began back then. And I made the statement and an opinion that Hollywood was the reason for the decline of Harlem Renaissance movement in a film. The film portion of the Harlem Renaissance. And we see how from 1930s to the 1970s, how black directors, black actors, black producers, black technicians, black people who operated cast and crew, all the above, all the workings, writers, authors, all the workings of creating films collaboratively came together. Brilliant minds, brilliant women and men, men and women coming together to create a different narrative, a different culture. So from 1970s and 80s and 90s, those 3 decades, we see a lot of movies that we reflect and go back and look at certain movies, and then we make a comparison using comparative analysis to so-called white films and how they portray blackness is radically different than how black people groups excellently demonstrated what blackness was to them and how they want to use and show up their blackness, changing the narratives. And now we come to this article that was written 10 years ago, 2016. And if you can think and imagine all the things that were going on 10 years ago, 2016, what was going on in 2016? Now, let's go back to the questions. Mind you, this is all part of my research for Whiteness in Film. I want to give credit where credit is due. I'm not trying to steal anybody's intellectual property here. At the same time, I'm going to use giving credit, but I'm going to use other great minds' works to build upon as I'm creating my own body of work. I hope one day someone else uses to build upon. But getting back to this literature here, the perpetuating whiteness in today's films, and this was written 10 years ago, 2016. If we think about all the things that were going on in 2016, just to cover the questions again, so let's think back, 10 years ago, 2016, what was going on? Let's put ourselves in that state of mind frame. What was going on? And if we take the approach of the doctors that came together collaboratively to create a meaningful working definition based upon their experiences of what whiteness was, now we look at whiteness in film, and everything that we have addressed here, we meaning me and you, the audience and myself, the things that I'm addressing that we together have come together because you're just as much as part of my research. So being interactive and once again putting ourselves in the state of mind 10 years ago. Let's look at these questions again. In the 21st century world that we are supposed to be living in, where racism and discrimination are frowned upon, why is there still a permanence, a continuity, and a focus on almost all Caucasian casts in the film industry? That's one question. Another question, what is it about Hollywood that still lacks diversity? That's one question. That's the second question. Here's another question. Is it the still perpetuating white privilege of society that elevates Caucasian opportunities but diminishes that of other ethnicities? So what was going on back then? And does the author who created this snippet of literature make any good points to you? I think they make some really good points. And just to talk about what I said yesterday on my live, how whiteness in film is anti-black. And looking at different ways how white Euro people groups, particularly, but specifically in America, how white Euro people and groups of white Euro people, Americans, have created the imagery of what blackness is. And then we also went over blackface. So in movies during the early 20th century, going into from the 1910s to the 1920s, silent film, 1930s, 1950s, classic Hollywood, from the 60s to the early 80s, black exploitation film, 80s until the early 2000s, or the turn of the century, showing how black people groups in America, black people groups who are Americans in America have created their own bodies of work, their own arts, their own artistry, films, brilliantly, I may add, showcase